welcome to Memology 101. Today, we're going to be discussing memes as a conduit for a new form of communication, or, as I wrote here more simply, memes as communication. Many of the concepts that we talked about in our first two videos are going to play a part in our discussion about how memes are used as communication here. Particularly, things like symbolism and cultural references are really going to play a big part in how people use memes to communicate ideas with one another. Now, we've talked about symbolism as it pertains to memes before, and it's a vital part of the understanding of the meme format. It's also vital when you're trying to understand how people use memes to communicate with one another, as the memes they use will be symbolic representations of the things that they are trying to communicate. For some really easy examples of this, let's turn to something that we've talked about before, like a text post or a text meme. Generally popularized on the internet and social media, they make their way into people's vocabularies and intertwine with everyday conversation. Let's take, for example, something we've talked about, like the word yeet. It started out on Twitter, it became part of people's vocabulary, and thus became synonymous or symbolic for meaning not this or not that. And the term yeet all of a sudden became a conversational way to communicate that idea. Of course, similar phenomenon take place all the time with countless examples of text posts, things like "that ain't it, chief." But it really gets a little more complicated when you start looking at things like images and GIFs, and not that much more complicated, but there's more to it. Now, images or GIFs don't necessarily replace the exact word or the exact definition as something like a text post that's transferred into a verbal conversation might. They generally more symbolize physical reactions or interactions that we might have with someone and show a way that we're feeling or thinking about a subject rather than swap for just another word to express that feeling. Now, because of this, meme images and GIFs don't fall into the same category as text posts because the communication that they have is situationally based, as in they can't be used interchangeably in conversation and still mean the same thing. It is solely based upon the context in which you sent to that person. So, while you are still communicating something, it's not a free range of communication that one may have with words to express exactly what you're feeling. It's more situationally based to express how you feel in response to what someone else has said to you. Let's go through some quick examples. If I was a teacher in a course, say, one on memology, and I was to come out on a Friday and say, "Alright class, you have homework due on Sunday night at midnight." In your mind, your reaction might very well be, but if you were to send me that image in your head as a response to what I said, I would still understand what you were trying to communicate. Whereas, if you sent me that same image, if I came out and said, "Hey class, I brought donuts to class today," it really wouldn't mean anything. Let's take a look at this chart for some more clarification. You begin at the top with a conversation between you and a friend. The conversation provides the context in which you can implant a meme as your reaction to the context of that conversation. After that, a mutual understanding between you and your friend ensures that they can formulate a meaningful response out of the meme that you use to react to the context of their conversation. And in this way, memes form a way to communicate by implanting responses that share a mutual understanding between the conversation partners. Moving on from our little triangle description of how meme conversation works, there are a lot of other things to discuss as reasons that make memes a great way to communicate. One of those main reasons that I find is the amount of subject material that can be fit into a single meme. When you communicate with something, it's not just communicating a single idea as a response to something like we've just talked about. That's just the simplest way in which they're used as communication. Another reason that they're great for it, and another way they're used in it, is to communicate multiple ideas across one platform in one space with the one image. And the way that they do this is, as we talked about before, Memes often contain a lot more information than can be scratched at the surface by just understanding the joke, and contain a lot of cultural and symbolic references that, with an understanding, can give even more insight into how a person is trying to communicate a situation, feeling, or response. So, being paired with the situational perfectness of being able to use a meme in exact conversations, along with the fact that they can carry a lot more meaning than that one situation can imply, makes them great tools for a wide range of communication. After all, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and if that's the case, then in my mind, a meme is worth 1,000,000, because you can pack so much symbolic and cultural references into it that it can be used as a way to communicate in thousands of different situations, whereas words or a picture might be only good for a few or a dozen types of situations or responses. You can recycle and reuse memes as ways to communicate for really anything, as long as you and that person have a similar understanding of what you're trying to communicate with that meme. Unfortunately, it's time to burst the bubble. Memes are great for communicating, as I've talked about, and the reason that they are is because of their ability for a shared idea and mutual understanding of what you are trying to communicate. But what if there is no understanding? How do you communicate an idea to someone through pictures if they don't even know what they're looking at in that picture? And thus presents the problems of communicating through memes. So is that a full stop on meme communication then? Is it not a viable way to communicate if it can't get to everyone? No, of course not. People don't all speak the same languages, and people aren't all just as literate in the same things. Just like your grandparents might not know how to use a computer and therefore won't understand some of the texts or acronyms you might send them in an email. The same way as your parents, who didn't grow up around this and aren't as literate in the digital text and memes that we use to communicate, will have almost no understanding of what it is that you're trying to communicate and symbolize to them through those pictures. And so, communicating with memes can fall short if that person is outside of your circle of understanding. So it would stand to reason that meme communication would be subjective only to people within your own cultural group, but that's not the case, because memes exceed cultural lines and boundaries. And while you might not understand exactly what someone is trying to communicate through a meme, if you understand some of the literary, ideologic, symbolic references that they're making inside of those memes, you can still decipher some sort of response that you couldn't get if they maybe responded in a foreign language or they responded with just a picture. But responding with a meme allows for this discourse and this analyzation that you wouldn't get outside of that. As with any time you discuss communication, and as it seems with life in general, it's never that simple, and there are a lot of things that we didn't get to discuss as to what makes memes good for communication. But hopefully some of the concepts that we covered today, things like symbolic and cultural references, as well as mutual understanding and context, can help you in determining why and which memes are good for communication.